Hello, welcome to Vest Top 5. I'm Best Guy, and today we're talking about the James Bond franchise. The longest franchise that I can think of in the top of my head. This franchise has been around since the 1960s, 1962 to be exact. And we're talking today about the top 5 films in that franchise. For number 5, we have Goldeneye, released in 1995, starring Pierce Brosnan. I recall seeing this movie when it first came out. Great movie, it blew me away, and it still holds up today. It has great action sequences, as Pierce Brosnan playing perhaps in the best Bond movie of his era. Sadly, the other ones that came around weren't as good, but GoldenEye still holds up. Definitely watch it if you've never seen it, and if you are a fan of action movies. The story in GoldenEye is there's a satellite, which is called GoldenEye, which can take out any electronic device. It uses an EMP to destroy the enemy's electricity and any other electronic devices. The movie still holds up for having great special effects, pretty cool action sequences. GoldenEye introduces the new M, played by Judi Dench, who is so good that she has played the character from 1995 until 2012. That shows you how well she was at playing M. Very memorable. The plot in GoldenEye, we have Alec Trevelyan, who is the rival to James Bond. He's 006. And he steals a weapon called GoldenEye, which is a satellite which can be targeted into any enemy line and destroy their electronic devices. The story is a little, thin, but the action's great. It still holds up today, like I said. Definitely watch it. Number 4 is Skyfall, released in 2012, starring Daniel Craig. This movie was so good. I remember when it came out, I wasn't completely disappointed with Quantum of Solace, but this is a huge improvement over Quantum of Solace in terms of story, and it's actually better directed, in my opinion, by Sam Mendes. And not just that, the story, a lot of people will complain that the story of Skyfall is very reminiscent of the first Mission Impossible. Because the story in Skyfall is that there's a list of agents that's out on the loose, that someone has stolen the list of agents and their real identities, which is a similar plot that was used in Mission Impossible. I would not go to that stretch and saying it's a complete remake of Mission Impossible, but it does borrow elements, but it does it in a way where it uses a completely different story after that. We have a character, Silva, played by Javier Bardem, which is probably one of the best villains in the James Bond franchise. He actually seems like an equal to James Bond. He's actually a former 00 agent from the MI6. Notice how the two films that I've mentioned on this list, GoldenEye and Skyfall, have great villains, and the reason why they're great villains is because they're almost as close to James Bond. They're both characters that are complex, and they were former 00 agents. Skyfall was also released in the 50th anniversary of the James Bond franchise, and unlike Die Another Day, which was released in the 40th anniversary, it was a huge improvement. And it marks as not only a great movie for 2012, but a great movie for that franchise. For number 3, we have another Daniel Craig movie, and that is Casino Royale, the first film with Daniel Craig. This movie was directed by Martin Campbell, who also directed GoldenEye. I would love to see Martin Campbell direct another Bond movie because he's so good at it. Casino Royale tells the story of James Bond before he was James Bond, before he obtained a 00 status. At least a small portion of the film, at least the first 15 to 20 minutes, are establishing that James Bond is an agent, but he still doesn't have the license to kill. And he's a bit of a brute force. He's not the suave character that we know of. He's still in training. And he has to stop a character named Le Chiffre, who is a terrorist. Well, he's not exactly a terrorist. He is using money that would fund terrorism, and he's lost the money. You will have to watch the movie to show you how he loses that money, but he has to play at a high-stakes poker game in Montenegro, which is in Italy, to obtain that money back. James Bond's assignment is to stop him from winning that money, because if he wins that money, he will be funding terrorism in a way. The movie is a little long for my taste. It's probably one of the longest Bond films in the franchise. I think it's both Skyfall and Casino Royale are some of the longest ones. Actually, no, the longest one is Spectre, and that one's pretty boring. But Casino Royale is a little long, but it's still really good. It has also one of the best Bond girls, Vesper Lynd, who I believe she's in the show Penny Dreadful. She plays a very good, complex character who is not completely good and not completely bad. She's an interesting character. It's funny because most of the Bond girls, I usually forget about them. They're very forgettable characters. But in Casino Royale, I always remember the character of Vesper Lynd. So for number 2, we have Sean Connery, From Russia with Love. From Russia with Love was released in 1963 and is a direct sequel to Dr. No, in a way, because the story of From Russia with Love is pretty much James Bond is sent on a mission to find a device called a Lector. And little does he know that the device is on the hands of Spectre, which were the enemies that were briefly introduced by Dr. No in the first film, Dr. No. The movie is not just a great James Bond movie, it's a good spy movie. There's a great sequence in this movie in a train where James Bond, again, has this... he's not the main villain, he's a henchman, but he's up on par with James Bond because he's also an agent. Whenever you put James Bond against an agent, and you don't take the story to the spoof side of the spoof realm of James Bond, they're actually good movies. It's when they become self-parodies in a way that they just lose their charm. But From Russia with Love has a great balance of witty humor from Bond that's not too campy, a story that's pretty believable. There's no like hidden base or there's no like laser up in the sky sort of shit like we saw in Die Another Day. This is a classic. I definitely recommend it if you've never seen it. But what could possibly be better than From Russia with Love? Well, for number one, we have the classic Sean Connery. Again, a terrible Sean Connery impression, please forgive me. Number one is Goldfinger. Why is Goldfinger number one? Well, every other Bond movie is pretty much a clone of Goldfinger. Goldfinger was the first Bond movie to introduce us to the car, the gorgeous girls. Pretty much every trope that you see in every other James Bond movie is pretty much from Goldfinger. But Goldfinger manages to balance the sort of camp that's not completely camp like You Only Live Twice or even Diamonds Are Forever or any of those other later Sean Connery attempts. This one is very grounded. There's humor, but it's not to the point where it's just stupid. The story in Goldfinger is there's a character named Orc Goldfinger who is obsessed with gold, and he's planning to use an atom bomb to be placed in Fort Knox. And supposedly no one has ever seen or been able to take photographs of Fort Knox, but the character of Goldfinger finds a way to get inside and plant a bomb, and hopefully if the bomb goes off, the gold will be radioactive for 59 years, according to this film, and the stocks and the price that he has in gold will rise to a point that's just even more than what he owns. So
that's the guy with the gold dick, right?
That's Goldmember, man. Again, see, that's a problem with the Bond movies, that the Bond movies have created parodies. And again, like I said, most of the other Bond movies are trying to be like Goldfinger. That's the reason why Spectre didn't work so well, because Spectre was trying to, again, balance the dark with the witty humor, kind of like Goldfinger, but didn't do it very well. It's actually pretty boring.
Did Sean Connery use his Goldfinger to slap bitches?
He's not. Goldfinger is the villain. His name is Auric Goldfinger, and the only reason he just likes gold. There is no gold dick. There's no Goldfinger.
I don't want to watch this shit.
Fuck you guys, man.
So Sean Connery does not have...
No, there's no gold dick, no gold ass. Well, actually, the only gold thing, if this makes you happy, if this makes you go watch the movie, there's a chick completely naked, painted in gold. You see her ass.
And she gets poisoned from all the gold paint, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know
exactly. That's the scene.
Okay, now
you'll watch it. Okay, good. So that's why Goldfinger's number one. Not because of the story, not because of the great action sequence, but because we see a butt-naked girl covered in paint. So definitely watch Goldfinger. So anyway, I'm Vest Guy, and this was Vest Top 5. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, what's your favorite Bond movie? Please let me know in the comment section down below. And make sure to like and subscribe. And make your vodka martini shake and not start.
That was fucking terrible.